All right, I have 6:30. I'd like to call to order the Board of Trustees for the Village of Cottage Grove. It's 6:31 on my watch. We are holding, unfortunately, this meeting continually via Zoom due to the pandemic. And we will start, and so everything that's going on in the Zoom is being recorded, so everybody knows that, including the chats. And we'll start off with a call to order. I'm sorry, with a roll call. I just did a call to order.
Alan? Alan?
You're on mute, Troy.
All right, I'll try that present. Third time's the charm.
Thank you. Lindbergh? Murphy?
Present.
Radcliffe?
Here.
Valencia?
Present.
Vandervelde?
Present.
And Williams.
Present. Jeff is excused, so just so everybody knows that. We will move on then to indicate that that we have a quorum and the agenda was properly posted, and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So everybody try to find a flag somewhere. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America,
and to the
and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
liberty, and justice for all.
Some young citizens on the left. Good. We'll start then with public appearances, public's opportunity to speak on any subject. Again, we ask the public to provide their name, their address, and to limit their comments to 3 minutes in case we have a lot of folks who want to speak. So with that, I'll pause and be silent for anyone who would like to chime in. All right, we'll move on then to item 5, is discuss and consider the meeting minutes from our regular village board meeting from November 16th. Any comments, questions, or edits? Or motion?
I did just have one edit. I think number 8, letter C, letter C, the motion is, I think, a voice vote of 6-0-0 instead of 7.
Lisa, do you have that?
Yep, I do. And Melissa had sent it to me, so it is corrected. It just wasn't on the packet version. But thank you for catching that, Sarah.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Melissa. Any other comments or a motion to approve with that edits?
I move to approve the minutes from last meeting.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Troy. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right. Next, we have a presentation to the board. This is a presentation on tree inventory from Kelly Tuttle from Blue Stem Forestry Consulting. And this is something that the board approved for this year's budget to do a tree inventory. Obviously, make sure that all of our trees are accounted for the village trees, and then the forester and Sean can maintain them accordingly. So with that, I will turn it over to Kelly. She's on. Yeah.
Hi.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I have a striped shirt on. My name is Kelly Tuttle. I'm with Blue Stem Forestry Consulting. I was hired this spring to complete your tree inventory and then develop a management plan based on the data that I found. So Sean recommended I take just about 5 minutes. I did this for the Parks and Rec Committee a couple weeks ago. So I'm just going to kind of do the same thing. I want to start by saying that I had done a tree inventory for Cottage Grove 13 years ago, maybe. It was your first ever at that time. It was a real treat to come back and see your trees again. You've added a lot of trees, which is wonderful news. And I have been doing this since 1998. And I can say without a doubt that you are doing an excellent job. Your staff is doing a wonderful job with your trees. And I always encourage my cities, if you can do only one thing, please take care of their little trees. If you prune them when they're young, it saves a lot of time and money later, and it makes the tree longer lived and healthier. And you do that perfectly. So it was a treat to work in Cottage Grove again. So thank you for that. So I'll just get to some of my findings. I'm assuming you all have a copy of the plan, and we'll have a chance to read through it when you get a few moments, but I'll give you the highlights. So you have about 3,500 trees. And so I inventoried all of your city streets, and I also did all of your parks. I didn't do wooded portions of parks, but if there was a tree in a maintained area, I looked at all of those. Primarily looking for species, size, condition, so the health of the tree, if it needs any maintenance. There's actually about 13 different attributes of data that I collect, but those are kind of the biggies that we'll talk about tonight. So 3,500 trees, just over 3,500 trees. You only have 213 planting sites, which is amazing. You do a really good job of planting trees. You do a really good job of planting a diverse number of trees, by species of trees. Only 204 park trees, so most of your trees can be found on your streets, which is wonderful. You have 331 ash trees, which is just over 9% of your population. And as you know, your staff treats those trees to prevent emerald ash borer, and they look great. I think it's wonderful to see those trees saved and kept in your population. And I would say 9.4% is a reasonable number. I think the smallest I've seen is probably 4%, and I've seen as high as 35% ash. So 9.4% is a good number. Completely manageable there. Of the 3,500 trees, I thought 65 needed removed. This is a really small number. This is 1.7% of your population. Typical first-time inventories are anywhere between 3 and 10%. And I feel like because it's been 13 years, we could probably use that figure again. So that's a really low number. The reasons that you would remove a tree is that it was dying. It is dead. It has suffered severe construction damage, something like that. So really a very low number. Again, another thing I looked at was whether a tree should be pruned, meaning it has a large hanger, large dead branch, blocking a stop sign, that type of thing. Only 23 trees I thought needed any sort of, attention in the next couple months. So again, really, really low, indicating that your staff is doing a phenomenal job of maintaining your trees. So kind of to get to that, I think the biggest takeaway for me, after walking through your city all summer, you're doing a great job. I think as the trees age, it's going to take more time and effort to maintain the trees, simply because the trees are getting larger. It's harder to prune trees when they're larger. It just takes more time. When trees are small, you can do it from the ground in 15, 20 minutes. But if you're talking about a 30-inch diameter tree that's 50 feet tall, it's going to take you a few hours. So just know that as these trees age and as these trees get bigger, your staff is going to need to dedicate more time. And I am 100% certain your staff is capable of doing this work. They just do phenomenal work, and it was really, really nice to see your trees and not give you a bunch of bad news. So I wanted to kind of talk about species diversity a little bit. Just flipping my page. So generally, because of Vermont Ashbourne, before that, American elm, we try not to plant more than 5% of any one species or 10% of any one genus within our cities on our public properties, so that if, Asian longhorn beetle arrives, which loves maple, that you're not looking at losing 35, 40, 50% of your population. I think with the trees that you've been planting, you've done a really nice job of diversifying your population. You do have 6 species that are overrepresented, or 6 genuses. Maple is at 37.7%. Not uncommon. That's actually for maple, a decent number. It's usually higher than that. I'd say 45 to 50%. And most of the communities that I work in are looking at maple, with an even higher composition than 37%. So it is a really popular tree. A lot of folks want a maple in front of their home. I'm not saying never plant a maple, because you don't want to get rid of the maple in your population. You do want them to remain a component, but as Sean and James know, just be judicious with your maple planting from here on out. Honey locust is next at 13.5%, linden at 10.5%, oak at 10%, ash at 9.4%, and elm at 5.7%. So really, the only one I'm terribly concerned about being an overpopulated species is maple. The honey locust is getting up there. It, again, is a really popular tree, primarily because you don't have to rake in the fall. Those leaves are really tiny and tend to just blow away. So just something to keep in mind. I will say it's incredibly challenging to find trees that are affordable in different species. All of the ones I just listed are our most inexpensive trees, and that's why we plant them. And supply is there. We always want to plant Turkish filbert or Kentucky coffee tree, but they can be hard to find, and when you do find them, they can be really expensive. So I think you're doing a good job with your new trees as far as diversifying. So just another good example of how you guys are managing well. The other thing was your size distribution. As you know, because you live there and you drive around all the time, a lot of your trees are younger. So, when I say diameter, so it's diameter at breast height, which is about 4.5 feet above ground, give or take. In the 0 to 8 inch diameter class, ideally you want about 40% of your forest in that size class, and you guys are at 53%. So, and I think you all know that your trees are younger and they're going to continue to grow. Not a bad situation. I'd rather see that than the other end, where you have a large number of older trees that are dying and you're losing them out of your population. You only have 2.3% trees that are 25 inches in diameter and over. So again, as you know, your population is smaller sized, younger age trees. They're going to take more time again as they age to maintain and take care of. So as far as condition goes, I think this was the probably the best I've ever seen. 94.4% of your total population is in fair, good, or excellent condition. So really, really good news. So again, kudos there. The other thing I was just going to mention was kind of what, just to give you an idea of what I do is, so I came up with a list of activities that I think your staff should be performing every year on your trees to maintain them properly, based on recommended activities. So on a typical year, you're going to have to remove those 65 trees. You're going to have to prune those 23 trees that I mentioned. So that's kind of immediate needs that will get done hopefully over the winter or through next summer. But after that, you're looking at just maintaining your forest. So you're pruning, you're planting, you're treating for emerald ash borer. So just to give you an idea of what kind of the workload is looking like, what I think the workload should look like, you're gonna have to treat your ash every third year, every other year. So you're gonna need to routinely prune your population. The DNR recommends every 5 to 7 years. I think you guys can get away with 8 years because you've done a really nice job on the young ones. That's 340 trees. That's a lot of work. You're still going to need to prune those new trees that you've planted. That's about 200. And it feels like at this point with the spaces you have open, you're going to be planting about 40 trees a year. So those are kind of the big categories of items that will need done every year by your staff. And it does take time. It does take equipment. I think they've already done a nice job and probably saved you untold dollars down the road by taking care of your younger trees. So it is really nice to see a community that allows their staff to complete this so thoroughly. So again, that was really nice. That's kind of my spiel, my 5-minute spiel. And it looks like you have a pretty big agenda. So any questions for me?
Thanks, Kelly. We appreciate the work as well as the summary. I'm sure Sean and Jamie and company are already working on the trees that need to be removed as well as the pruning because they always are diligent about that. Any questions from the board? Kelly, I have a question. So you said you were in the village 13 years ago doing an inventory. How often do you think we should be doing this? I know we put time and effort to actually capture the trees electronically this time because we had that feature with the GIS. Should we seek out a professional like yourself, and how often? So
the DNR recommends redoing your inventory every 5 to 6 years. Okay. I think based on your population, because your trees are younger, I think you could probably push that out a little further because your trees are just in such good shape right now and your staff does such a good job. I think you could probably get away every 9 or 10 years at this point. So, the trees were, I did use GPS to capture all the data, and it's MSA, I believe, already has that uploaded onto your program. So, I think you're looking good just because your trees are in such good shape. I think if you did it, 8, 9, 10 years, I think you'd be fine.
Okay, thank you. Sean, any comments regarding what Kelly presented or from what James has looked at or Burris or what you've looked at?
No, appreciate Kelly coming down. She lives in Drummond, Wisconsin, so she had to make the trek. And then when she was down here, she unfortunately had to go home and quarantine a little bit because I think there's 2 cases in Drummond or something at that point. So we certainly appreciate her expertise, and it's really refreshing to know that our hard work is paying off.
Definitely.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board? All right.
It
Super.
looks like Troy's trying to talk.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm having a tough time tonight, guys. It's Monday, and 7 days will be Monday all over again. We got that to look forward to. Now that all the trees are inventoried and we have species identified as Public Works replaces trees, are we updating that information?
I can go ahead. Yeah, Troy, we'll be entering that information into the GIS system, and as well as new trees that we plant, we'll have a head start on that because Kelly's gotten everything that we currently have, and it'll also be nice because we'll be able to record any maintenance that happens on the trees. So every time we prune them, every time we do an EAB treatment, it'll be on our GIS system.
I do a lot of the stuff myself, actually, in the trees. Because I'm on a street corner and branches get low and stuff. I'm not recording it, just so you know, though. And then is that palm tree behind you? Is that recorded in the inventory as well?
Not currently. I'm not sure that Kelly got that one, but
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again, Kelly, for joining us this evening and presenting. Appreciate it, your hard work. And thank you. And thanks, Sean, as well as Pastor Longer. Thanks to James for his hard work. We'll move on then to unfinished business, discuss and consider green space easement. Aaron was kind enough to put a memo in the packet, so I'll let him start off with this topic.
Yeah, thanks, John. So I'll provide a little bit of the background and then turn it over to Larry to talk about some of the policy implications and where we want to go moving forward. So this is somewhat related to an issue we talked about back in November with some easements in Oakengate and South Lawn Estates First Edition that were labeled as floodplains. That's just one type of easement that runs through these plats. There's also some that are labeled as buffer strips or greenways or public access easements, and they all kind of overlap and the designations change in different places. These plats all predate any of the staff's involvement with the village, so there wasn't any institutional memory about what the different designations were supposed to mean. So we've been spending some time kind of digging into those. It's something that never really came up until a few months ago, and then we've had several requests primarily for pools that have impacted some of these corridors. In November, we looked at the one impacting the floodplain line, and we kind of set a precedent for that, allowing them to move forward with that pool as long as they met some conditions established by MSA. So we want to kind of continue that conversation and look at the easements that are labeled as either buffer strips or greenways or public access easements. So in the staff report, there's a whole list of all the different easement labels that appear in the different plats. The public access designation appears in the South Lawn Estates First Edition plat. Clearly, that would seem to imply that when that area was platted, there was at least they wanted to leave the door open, that there could be some sort of trail or path through those easements. In our research as staff, we didn't find any real evidence that it went any further than that there was any serious planning or contemplation beyond just leaving that designation on the plat. Our assumption would be they left that easement fairly broad because they didn't really have a specific path in mind. They just wanted to draw it in a way that they could find a route through it. Buffer strip, that would typically mean space between two such areas, basically, as the name implies, buffering those two areas. It would not, imply public access in and of itself. Greenway is a little bit harder to define. It can sometimes mean a path, but it doesn't necessarily. It could just be a linear green space. In the Oakengate plat, it's always used in conjunction with buffer strip, so greenway and buffer strip. It would seem to be a little bit redundant if those were intended to mean the same thing, but it's also not very specific if the intent was to have it provide public access, because, for example, South Lawn made that very specific. So the question is, moving forward, we're just looking for a little direction on how to handle requests for pools or other structures that might impact those different kinds of easements. And I think Larry can get into some of the details of that.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. So I see that the Fosters are on tonight, and also their attorney, my friend Mitch Olson, from Axley. They're the folks who got us started on this this exploration of green space easements in our community, and we've really been working on it since they made a request to install or to construct a pool. We've been working on this pretty much off and on since that request. And as you'll note in Aaron's memo, that we've spoken to CARP-C, we've spoken to DNR, we've spoken to the developers of these plats to try to gather some of that institutional knowledge from those who were around. And what we've determined, just to start out with, in terms of a big picture, what we've determined is that as part of the development process, at some point, DNR and or CARP-C's predecessor staff said, hey, let's require these plats to have a green space. Well, I'm just going to call all these green space easements, even though they use different terminology. They're very inconsistently applied from plat to plat. If we did that today, if there's a plat moving forward in this community that is subject to some sort of a public easement, we will specify what the purpose of that easement is and what it's there for. And we will have an easement document that will accompany the plat, not just language on the plat that people are supposed to figure out decades down the road when a question like this is asked. That was not done when these plats were approved, and so we're left, as Aaron said, with some speculation and a whole lot of detective work to try to figure out what was intended here. What I have concluded is that the village has the flexibility, should it choose to exercise that flexibility, to allow encroachment into these easements. In other words, it's really up to the village. It's a property right that the village holds, just like it would hold an easement for, let's say, stormwater drainage across a plat or something like that. The property interest. It's not a regulatory function. It's a property interest. So that was the big struggle that we had, was coming to the conclusion that you can do what you choose to do. And then what we attempted to do here is to create a little bit more detail for you as to what options you might consider. So if you follow along on the memo that was posted, one of the things you can do is nothing. You can prohibit development within the areas just by literally doing nothing. But the challenge there is the staff are still going to need some direction, I think, because there are places within the village. We haven't done a survey, any kind of a formal survey, but anecdotally, there are places where there are secondary structures, whether it be, a yard shed, maybe a deck, or other secondary structures that are in these easements now that got missed, largely probably because nobody, once this was done, because there wasn't any follow-through, it just got left behind. It sounds like there's a couple of, maybe one or more houses, primary structures, that actually have some portion of their footprint in these areas too. So we'll have to decide what to do to clean up past, errors, if we will, if you decide to go that route. The second option is for you to allow a limited scope of development in these areas. And there's a lot of options open to you as to how to do this. You could allow secondary structures like the pool that the Fosters were seeking to construct, and decks and other kinds of things that are that really don't bring the main development into that area. You could allow even a home to be developed within this area. If you do allow that, if you decide to do that, if there's interest in that, we would recommend that you specify, or we work together to specify what areas within these easements you would allow that development, from all of it to a certain distance from the creek. I think that when you look at this kind of an area, what you're looking at is the reason these green space easements are here is because there's a drainage way that passes along the back side of these lots that are subject to these restrictions. And there's some really well-developed examples of how we regulate development in this state based on its distance from a waterway. And a couple of those were included under number 3 in the memo. In unincorporated areas, there's a 75-foot setback for most development. There are exceptions to that for boathouses and calves and piers and those sorts of things on water bodies. And applicable here, probably, for incorporated areas, there's similar restrictions that set a 50-foot setback from the water body. So really, what we should probably do anyway, and you can decide whether to incorporate this task into solving this issue too. What we should really do is set out to create a shoreline zoning ordinance for the village. We're required by law to do that. It hasn't been done yet, as far as we can tell. If it had been attempted or initiated in the past, it wasn't completed. That's largely because the village has very, very little water, and probably fell through the cracks. But we should probably do that anyway. And if we do that, the village will be subject to a minimum setback from navigable waters of 50 feet for development. So that's a good place to start in terms of your sort of debate as a board as to what direction you'd like to give us if you decide you'd like to allow some development within these easement areas, but you want to impose restrictions. That 50 to 75 feet is what we see depending on where you are in other areas, elsewhere around the state under state law. I would also, though, recommend, and we included this in number 4 on our memo, that if you do allow some level of development within these areas, that you also include as another factor someone would have to meet that the elevation would be above the 100-year, 24-hour storm flood elevation risk area, which is, as Aaron said, what we used as the standard in the November decision for the other property. So you've got some options in front of you. From our perspective, what you need to tell us is, do you want us to? We probably have to do a shoreline zoning ordinance, regardless of what you decide tonight on these easements. But as we do that ordinance, if you want to allow some development in these areas where people are trying to improve their existing properties. Generally, these easement areas have all been built up. These aren't vacant lots at this point. But if you want to allow that kind of construction activity in the village, my recommendation, I guess, would be that we do this together with the shoreline zoning ordinance, just to make it easier and more consistent across the board.
All right. Aaron and Larry, thank you. Questions from the board? I'll turn that over to you guys.
This is Sarah. Do any of those options require us, or do we redraw the plat and in some of these areas are no longer easements, or will they always be easements? It's just if we want to allow construction or not.
Well, there's a couple ways you can handle that. What we're anticipating here is just, we have the right to say no, but if you decide to, create some flexibility here, basically what we would be saying is we'd be giving these homeowners a permit to construct within our easement. It's not dissimilar to what we did a few months ago when, I'm forgetting the name of names of the people, but they wanted to build a deck out across a sewer line that we don't anticipate needing for very long, and we allowed that in a special circumstance. That's a village easement that we allowed construction over. That's Sarah, the way I would anticipate doing this. It is possible that we could go through the process of deeding away the easement rights to these property owners, but I think that would probably be more complicated than would be necessary.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Ivy.
Thanks, John. So the easements were put in place for a reason, even if we're not quite sure what it is. So I'm concerned about making building in the easements the rule and not the exception. Not that we can't grant exceptions or variances based on conditions, like if it's a surface that water can't infiltrate, that perhaps you install a rain garden or put in some other plants as it approaches the waterway to help infiltration. I mean, there could be impacts for downstream properties if, let's say, every property along the easement decides to put in a pool or a paved patio or a building of some type structure. And then when you add up all of those buildings, then that could cause water problems and drainage problems. So I wouldn't say that I would want to allow just kind of any building to be built on the easement, but more of like, I don't know, is this like option 3 sort of, where we establish a setback from the waterway? Is this maybe laid out in policies and criteria for environmental corridors that's adopted by the DNR and CARPC to use? Or I guess, how can we make this kind of an exception rather than a rule to allow any structures on environmental corridors?
I think that you're on the right track in terms of understanding what we're proposing. So our standard in this state, really, in terms of environmental corridors can be created anywhere, regardless of their distance from water, right? And the reason we lean towards the distance from water criteria is because the reason for this easement is because the drainage creek runs on the backside of these properties, and so it's more of an apples to apples comparison. So what you would be doing if, let's say, you imposed a 75-foot restriction, which is the higher of the two that we talked about, you would basically be saying, we're going to allow any construction within 75 feet. I'm sorry, outside of 75 feet, as long as it meets all other village ordinances and so on, right? And all other requirements. Inside of 75 feet, if that's the line you're going to choose, I guess I wouldn't recommend allowing construction within 75 feet other than those things that would end up being included as exceptions under the shoreline zoning ordinance, which would be something like a boathouse, which even, obviously nobody's going to put a boat on this tributary to the creek, but those are the kinds of things that are allowed. So if you sort of instruct us to use the shoreline zoning model, what we would be saying is if you're outside of 75 feet, and again, I would recommend you layer upon that a requirement in terms of elevation to make sure they're above the flood elevation, then your property is treated as if it was unrestricted. By an easement, you have to go and get your building permit, and it has to meet all of the zoning requirements and so on. The one thing that's I forgot to make clear is when you look at these plats, these easements that we're talking about, and particularly in the case of the Fosters, they're 200 feet wide, but they're also not centered on the stream. So for one property owner on one side of the stream, it might be a 75-foot setback from the stream effectively, and for a property owner on the other side, it might be 125. And so it's a 200-foot swath that the developer was allowed to sort of meander in the general area of the creek. And so it's pretty inconsistent as to how it applies on either side as you look at it. So I hesitate to say if we impose a 75-foot setback that everybody would gain 25 feet, because on some sides somebody would gain none, and on other sides people might gain 50 feet, just based on that inconsistency of how these easements were applied.
So, Larry, when you talk about the shoreline ordinance, typically communities, do you know what they go with? Do they go with 50, do they go with 75, or do they go with a different number? Or is it all over the board? All over the board?
So it's not all over the board. The counties impose these requirements on towns. So every county in the state has a shoreline zoning ordinance, and every one of those ordinances is a 75-foot setback. And so for all the unincorporated areas in the state, it's 75 feet. And then the state law on the municipal level only applies to properties, to parcels that were annexed later than the early 80s or incorporated later than the mid-90s. And those all have 50-foot setbacks. So this particular property likely was annexed later than the 80s or the early 80s. And so it's probably subject to this law. And so the minimum setback we would have to do, and we'll dig through this, first of all, we have to figure out if that stream is navigable, which it likely is under at least DNR's assessment. And so 50 feet would be really the number on our shoreline zoning ordinance. But in this case, you've actually got a property right. Shoreline zoning is a regulatory function. Here you've got a property right that was deeded to the village through the plat. So you have a little bit more flexibility if you wanted to be, like, again, if you want to do nothing here, you can, because even if we're going to have to do a shoreline zoning ordinance, and it'll say 50 feet. But you can still maintain these restrictions if you choose to, because they were deeded to the village through the plat. So anything between 50 and whatever the line is now for people like the Fosters is where your flexibility lies based on your property right.
Okay. So if the village...
You can't go less than 50.
Right. So if the village board was just to ask both ordinance committee as well as you, Larry, to establish a shoreline ordinance, and we standardize that, it would be 50 feet. And then the second piece of this, on the memo at least, is just allowing development, and to your point, ensuring that the elevations are appropriate for the 100-year or 25-hour flooding. Is that kind of your recommendation based on working with other communities where they have uncovered this issue and don't have it established?
Yeah, I don't think this is a one of a kind occurrence. There are unlikely to be any other communities that don't have a shoreline ordinance and have the same overlay of these easements. So I'll give you an example of what you could tell us to do based on some of the comments and Heidi's comments. You could say, all right, adopt the shoreline zoning ordinance. We want to, by the way, one of the things that wasn't, that's in the memo, but what maybe wasn't abundantly clear, some of these easements are 150 feet wide total on both sides of the creek, so they're basically a 75-foot setback already, except that they don't center on the creek, so somebody might have 50 and somebody might have 100. Some of them are 200 feet. So this was, and I asked Andrew Homburg and the other developer, how did you end up with these numbers all across the board? And they said, you just went out for a walk with a DNR staffer and somebody from Dane County Regional Planning, and they said, I'd like to have X feet. And then there was a horse trading, and then they never followed through with sort of imposing what kind of restrictions would apply. So one thing you could do is you could say, all right, let's treat everybody the same. 75 feet. Outside of 75 feet, you have the freedom you would have if you were 2 miles away from the creek. Inside of 75 feet, we're not going to allow any construction other than what would be consistent with our shoreline zoning ordinance. Anywhere else where there's development in the community in the future will be subject to the shoreline zoning ordinance, regardless of whether they're easements or not. So that's an option you could do moving forward. Now, for those people who are subject to the 150-foot total easement where they're lucky on their side it's less than 75 feet, half of 150, we're not going to be taking anything away from them. They would still enjoy the rights they have, but everyone who's above 75 feet away from the stream would benefit. And again, that's just one approach. It would happen to solve the issue for the Fosters, we are aware of, if you did that approach. So if you're curious as to what their circumstances are, they really need a few feet beyond what they're allowed to do now to put in what they'd like to do.
So would, if I can ask, would that be realigned to centered from the creek instead of wandering left and right and all of that? And if it's 50 feet, that's 100 feet total, then 50 on each side of the creek. If it's 75 feet, it's 150 feet. Again, 75 on each side from that center line, correct?
Right. So again, the 50-foot setback is going to apply. We're going to have to bring this back to you at some point, no matter what, because we need a shoreline zoning ordinance in the community. And any development that occurs, even on a non-platted property that happens to be next to a navigable water, will be subject to that 50-foot setback. What you're deciding now in terms of telling us how to move forward is, how do you want to deal with, let's say, 50 to 100 foot, maybe even a little bit more than that in some cases, easement control that we have now that really we're just becoming aware of for the first time because of the application submitted by the Fosters. How do you want us to deal with that?
I have another.
I guess I personally. Oh, go ahead, Heidi.
Oh, if you. Yeah. No, go ahead, Troy. I'm kind of.
I guess I'm in favor of making it equal for all from the center of the creek, and I think 50 feet is enough. You've got a 100-foot swath with the creek running through the center of it. That's just my opinion. I'm not sure restricting folks more than that is beneficial for them or our community at that point.
So, Troy, would you also be in favor of what Larry highlighted, then the elevations too for the 100-year and 24-hour?
Yeah,
you would want somebody you'd want them to know if they're going to be in trouble if we get a 10-inch rain, which unfortunately has happened in Dane County recently.
Yeah. We want to be out of the 100-year floodplain for development in general, but I don't see any reason why we'd want to be further than 100 feet center line from that creek to restrict folks from doing what they want to do with their property, especially since, again, it's not affecting citizens in the village adversely.
Other thoughts from board members or comments?
Yeah, I have another question about the regional water quality plan that's adopted by CARPC and the DNR. If we were to draft our ordinances to be consistent with that, just to create consistency in the region and actually achieve some of the regional water quality goals, across our region, how much farther, or maybe that's outside of the scope of this agenda item, but thought it would be worth asking. What are the other implications or restrictions that would be involved in changing to that? I guess, Larry, are you familiar with all the restrictions in the regional water quality plan?
I'm not familiar to the point of being able to take a test. So if there's one coming, I decline. But I guess one of the things that I think is worth, it's a great question, because one of the things that's worth considering as you wrestle with this, I think the first time we talked about it, there was a lot of positive support for the idea of, well, let's see what we can do so that people can have flexibility in what they can do with their property. But there was also the caveat that, but we need to make sure it doesn't sacrifice our other goals as a community, right? And so that is a perfect example of a source of considerations that you might want to weave into your ordinance for instance, a green space easement oftentimes is really focused on the primary structure and, your large home and things that are elevated visually. So, you might allow decks or patios into some of these more restricted areas. Other things that are not, 3 stories or 2 stories tall. That you might require, so that's from just an aesthetic side, but from a water quality standpoint, you might consider, requiring just one additional step in terms of the design of some of these structures, requiring that there's, on-site infiltration of stormwater. For a lot of structures you're going to put up on a larger lot, it's not going to really have any impact, but for some it might, right? And so you might want to have an internally drained system, a rain garden, something within that green space area. If there was, if it was anticipated there was going to be some sort of an impact. With a pool, you might have more additional storage for stormwater than you'll have issues of causing runoff, depending on what the area around the pool looks like. But that's not the case with every structure. So I think that's a great example, Heidi, of in the direction that you provide to us, feel free to include, evaluate that very plan for concepts that could be not too overwhelming for our property owners, but that might bear some consideration in terms of including. And we're going to make an exception on from a property right here. Maybe there's some things that would make that more justifiable or palatable to those interests.
Thanks, Larry. I just had one other question, which is more about future plats, and if we perhaps utilize outlots or land that's actually dedicated to the village for environmental corridors rather than putting easements on people's properties to prevent this kind of confusion property rights situations in the future. If we just have the green space, corridors, buffers dedicated to the village in future plats. I don't know if that's just kind of as we move forward kind of direction, or
yes.
Okay.
And it's absolutely what we do now. And or if there is an easement, it's specified as to what its purpose is and why it exists. And we hope that it's limited in scope to, just looking at the Shady Grove plat today, and it's got a drainage, stormwater, surface water easement across a couple of outlots, and it's very well defined. And the purposes of it, right on the face of the plat, are well defined. By the way, I've spoken with, as I said, I spoke with the folks at DNR who are active in this area, and they said you won't really be seeing this kind of thing in the future on plats, because they're cleaning up how they operate in terms of what they'll accept from CARPC. And CARPC understands that now, if they want something that'll stand the test of time and not be adjusted by a village board, as you potentially are poised to do, they need to be more clear on how these things work and apply them, as Troy said, a little bit more fairly. When one plat they arm wrestle for 200 feet, and the other plat they arm wrestle for 150 feet, it just goes to show that there's no real link to an actual sort of correlative environmental impact. It was so off the cuff then that it's very hard to justify that difference, at the very least, between plat from plat to plat that actually abut each other. Right?
Thanks.
Any other comments, I think, from the board? Larry, do you have enough information to run with? We certainly need to do the shoreline ordinance. Sounds like at least standardize the 50 feet, looking for fairness. And then obviously we need to handle the individual requests. And the elevation piece to the 100-year flood and everything and 24-hour flow. Is that enough direction you need at this point? And if anybody on the board tells me otherwise, please do.
I think we could use a little bit more. If we know we're going to do a shoreline zoning ordinance, and that will not be the most restrictive factor for properties that are subject to these easements. So for properties subject to these easements, I did get a sense from Troy's comment that you'd like to see the easement at least sort of applied more fairly from property to property. But I guess I'm looking for a little bit more. Are we looking at 75 feet? Are we looking at, should we allow some types of structures from the outside edge of these easements down to 75 feet? What are your thoughts?
I think, obviously we're going to handle these one-off in these, unfortunately, in these situations, and going forward it'll be very clear, but I think we should allow at least some consideration from the board as far as structures. Oftentimes they're probably not, traditional structures, a pool, a patio, a deck, or whatever. It's not, a house addition or something like that, because that's a different story entirely.
Oh, can I just go ahead, Trey? I was just going to summarize what I'm thinking I'm hearing, but one possibility with these, if we write these specific, 50 feet, 75 feet, then people could get a permit and it wouldn't even come to the board, right? If we said 50 feet and we'll allow these kinds of structures, then those easements, those building requests wouldn't even need to come to the board for any sort of approval, right? Am I
right?
And so that's one,
an option.
That's an option, or we could say 75 feet and or 50 feet or whatever, but the exceptions or the permit requests within there would come to the board, so that we could then determine, is this a deck or a new house, kind of as a case by case?
Yes, we could do that too, but we're going to have to create some very real and specific criteria upon which we would evaluate those asks. And so, as long as we'll do the hard work of defining those and not just saying we'll let you know when we see it, then we can do that.
I think that the 75 feet seems like something that we could apply kind of more of in a uniform way. I guess if we evaluated structures more on a case-by-case basis, maybe it would come down to if you're the infiltration rates of what's being installed or the water impacts of runoff. And like a patio and a deck would have very different infiltration impacts on stormwater.
Right. And Heidi, just to be clear, were you suggesting that those factors would come into play if somebody came to the village and said came to the board, you'd want them to come to the board asking for something within 75 feet?
Yes, that would encroach into the 75-foot buffer.
That we can do that, right? And really, what we would just do then is establish a policy that the board consider various things, including what we have just been articulated, when one of those requests would come in. That's very doable.
I guess again,
Go ahead.
I have no issues with it being 50 feet. I'm not a firm believer in taking away people's property rights. That is only hurting them. It's not helping our community, and I think most people would be hard pressed to want to be within 50 feet of a creek that, in theory, could flood. I think the structure you'd see would be more of a deck or something that is not going to be a structure where, or someone's going to take their lot and split it in half now and sell a lot.
Troy, I would have to disagree that the infiltration rates around a waterway could impact a different property owner. If you can no longer infiltrate the stormwater, someone downstream may experience flooding, and because of that lack of stormwater infiltration on the previous property as it was designed. So I think it could have an impact on downstream properties and therefore an impact on our community. I'm not sure what the right distance is in this specific waterway, but
why would have people paying taxes on their property that they can't utilize it the way they want to utilize it then? Within regulation.
Right. So just to be clear, these lots were all sold with these easements in place, and the value of the property is definitely affected by the presence of this easement. So you don't have a buildable, your whole lot's not buildable, right? And so it's what we're really talking about here is giving back to private landowners value that they had never received in the past. So the public purpose behind it really would be to allow people to improve the value of their properties, and as we're trying to do with new development, redevelopment or additional addition to properties helps us too in terms of our bottom line. So that would be your public purpose.
But what could the impacts be on a downstream property that then experiences flooding because every property along the easement has put in a structure? I think it's a good idea for us to just have a conversation with MSA from a stormwater engineering perspective about this, because I believe that most of these properties in this area, this is just mowed grass where these easements are. It's not like you have to stay out of them and it's the wildlife sanctuary of the community, right? They're people's yards, and that's appropriately so. And so I don't think they get a whole lot of infiltration or runoff control credit for that, especially with the slopes down to the creek. I'll be surprised if we don't have stormwater system size to manage that. But that's something we should maybe even have MSA participate when we bring back whatever this proposal will be, so we can really zero in on that and make sure there won't be impacts.
I'd hate to see us make a mountain out of a molehill on this, and from a perspective that we've had very few folks inquire about this. This hasn't been a big issue in the past, and when we make this change, I'm hoping that we see even fewer of these instances, because it's fair for all in that property area. So
I'm hearing bring something back at 75 feet, along with if you want anything inside of 75 feet, talk to us. But you better come with your T's crossed and your I's dotted in terms of presenting to us an assessment of some of the more environmental related potential impacts. But outside of 75 feet, let's authorize the use of the property just as we would if they were outside the easement.
That sounds reasonable to me, Larry.
And just to clarify, the 75 feet does meet the needs of the Fosters by an inch.
Are we able to talk or not? I don't know unless we're asked a question. Is that a question?
Yeah, Reed, you can speak. You've heard all this along the way as far as there is a question, at least from Sarah.
Great, thank you. I appreciate talking about this situation, and living over here, you'll realize that 100 feet comes all the way to the house, and so when you say 75 feet, it's really, really close for putting in a pool and a patio, and we'll have to restructure the back of our house as far as decks and things like that, extra spacing. And if you think about where our grass goes to that 50-foot mark. And so that'd be, again, if I see this about villages and cities, I do believe we live in a village. And so that seems to be the right idea here, is if we're following ordinances and laws. But the 75-foot is real close to being able to make something work in our case.
But 50 would be best.
Reed, and you're talking about the center of the creek, correct? Not where the current line is drawn, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Larry, if we make it 75 feet, somebody comes to us and needs another foot, it would just have to be raised up, correct? Or are we saying we get the shoreline thing, ordinance in, and we say no consistently?
You'd still have flexibility because your regulatory function is going to be 50 feet, right?
Right.
So from a regulatory standpoint, you're not going to allow development within 50 feet. You're required by state law to do that as a minimum. You'll still have flexibility between that 50 and 75 based on what I've been hearing now. But the analysis is, the instruction I think I'm getting, the analysis is going to be based on environmental impacts of what you might do within that 25 feet. I know we've gotten different opinions on that. Troy would just push it down to 50, but I'm getting a sense of, I guess I'd hear from everyone else. Do we push it down to 50, or do we create a 25-foot space there where we do some additional analysis?
I'd like to see an analysis to mitigate the impacts on infiltration in that 25 feet. I guess I wouldn't want to see it a no, but if we can mitigate any stormwater impacts in that 25-foot buffer by requiring, a rain garden or something to offset the impacts, and consult MSA in that.
That is actually, if we're going to limit it to just infiltration for stormwater, that would be relatively easy. And in fact, if any of these properties were outside of, were subject to Dane County zoning, just by the increase of the impervious surfaces area, they may have to do that anyway. So this is not an unusual requirement, and there's certainly consultants and professionals out there who understand what this means. So if we're talking about limiting the consideration between 50 and 75 feet to an infiltration calculus, that is pretty simple.
This is Melissa. I think I do agree with Heidi. I think it's important that we start looking at the environmental impacts that our development has in our community, as well as bigger. So I like what Heidi just said, and I'm glad that Larry thinks that it's easy enough to do and doable, and so that's where I'm at this point.
Any other board members have opinions, strong opinions? Otherwise, Larry's got his marching orders.
We don't need a motion?
It is a discuss and consider, so yes, we do, Sarah. Thank you.
No, I've got enough for now. If the discuss and consider would have been relevant if you would have said, let's do nothing. Let's wait on motions and votes until we bring something to you and see if you like it.
Larry, do we need a motion to table then?
Nope, you're fine. Just move on.
Okay. Thank you. And hopefully we can get this sorted for the residents impacted. All right, moving on then to new business. It is discuss and consider the release of Phase B Quarry Ridge Estates. So there is information in the packet related to this. There's a memo from Larry, actually, and Rick. Did we lose you, Larry?
Oh yeah, when you don't have good enough internet that people can see you're talking on mute, and you just go forever. Yeah, this is very simple. This is just Phase B for Quarry Ridge, and we recommend approval.
Okay. Any questions, comments from the board, or a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay.
I'll
First from-
second it.
No, I think-
Whatever.
Melissa, you have first. Troy, you have a second on that one. Crowd control today. All right.
Ladies first.
No, she beat you by the voice there. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anyone abstain? Motion carries. Item B is discuss and consider the amendment to the Atwell Suites developer agreement. So there's more in the packet related to that.
Right. This is just a change in the date for Atwell for this developer to get its prerequisites in place. In particular, they asked for a delay for providing evidence of their financing, and apparently due to COVID and lack of travel, not an easy time to find financing for a hotel. They do, however, I talked to their attorney, they do anticipate that changing very soon, and are also working through some less traditional channels to work on obtaining that. They anticipate being able to get that done long before the August 1st date, but they don't want to have to come back twice for a change. And depending on what happens with TID 10, you might find that there's a real need for a hotel, so things might change in that regard too. But that's what the ask is.
And we're okay with the timing for the TID? Is that correct?
Yes, every year they go without having things in place, the less they have available in terms of the TID life. But that's the choice they're making based on their ability to bring forward the project. So.
I'll make a motion to allow the amendment presented by Atwell Suites.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, Troy and Melissa.
Just one comment, John.
And then, yes, now Matt, please.
Yeah, that is a good comment, though, Troy. And Larry, I think correct me if I'm wrong, Troy, I think what you're referring to is the May deadline of 2021 for TID number 5. That's the end of our expenditure period. As long as the developer agreement is entered into prior to that date, that's what triggers the deadline is entering into the developer agreement. So just because the financing or other aspects are after, that's okay. So thank you.
All right, I just want to make sure we weren't missing something with that. That's all. I appreciate the clarity, Matt.
You bet.
All right, any further discussion?
I just wanted to verify that it was until August 1st of 2021.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. We have a motion and a second then to approve the extension for Atwell Suites. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Item C then is discuss and consider the release of Phase 2 for 5th addition to West Lawn Estates. All right.
And that's me again. So phase two, actually, kickoff is happening earlier than anticipated. This is a nothing to see here kind of agreement. There's a lot that goes into getting all the ducks in a row, which we found out this week to approve a second phase. But we recommend approval for the release of the next 13 lots in West Lawn Fifth Ave.
Any questions or comments?
I'll make that motion.
All
I'll
right.
second.
Motion from Troy, second from Melissa. Any further discussion? Any comments from Matt? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anyone abstain? Motion carries. Sorry, Matt, I had to do that to you. All right, then we'll move on to reports from village boards and commissions and committees, starting off with the ad hoc glacial drumlin bike path. I think this is you, Melissa, right? Nope.
Nope, it's me.
Sorry.
That's all right. So we met and finalized the bike path route and answered some of the final questions that MSA had, and so ready to proceed. You can see the packet in there if you're. Well, I guess it doesn't include the design, but if you want to see the design, we can get that to you. The final. JJ, anything to add?
Nope.
No, Public Works also saw it too. I'll cover that too as well. So,
Okay.
all good stuff. Exciting. It's going to be here before we know it. So now we just have to encourage the county to get their section done. All right. Thanks, Sarah. Then moving on to Utility Commission. Heidi?
Sure. We met on the 18th. I'll give the quick brief updates first and then talk about the Madison Met Sewerage District presentation. So maintenance began on well 3. We completed our lead and copper testing, filed a compliance maintenance annual report for sewage system with a grade A, and the Vilas Road extension work is now completed for the year. So we talked about the rising costs for Madison Met. You received a presentation today that they gave at the Utility Commission. So I'll try to summarize in my, and then I can have some technical assistance if I miss something. So overall, the district's treatment costs are increasing, and they use 7 different metrics to set rates. So the graphs in the presentation show the annual budgeted loads in pink, and then the actual loads for each quarter that are billed in blue. So MMSD's goal is to keep the two near each other. As you can see, some of the graphs are better at doing that than others. So then the district analyzes each community in the district to determine their share of the district's cost as a whole. So if you look at the Village of Cottage Grove charts, you can see our actual loads by quarter are a lot higher in 5 of the 7 parameters than the budgeted amount. So that means we need to adjust our rates. So our overall volume is pretty flat, but the loads of some of the pollutants that are removed are going up. So it's not likely due to increases in residential pollutants, but more likely an industrial user. So we're going to work with MSA to monitor those levels, figure out where it's coming from, and we can adjust rates for different user classes. So we have more analysis to do on that. I don't know if you have anything you want to add, JJ?
No, everything I had scribbled down for notes you covered, unless we've got any specific questions.
I guess my only comment would be I'm glad that the Utility Commission's digging into this and figuring out where it's coming from so that we can look at the classes and stuff and adjust accordingly, because we will hear it as a board when you go and bump into somebody in the grocery store or somewhere else about the rates when they come around again. And certainly you want to make sure that those that are creating the issue or needing the service, I should say in this case, are paying their fair share. So thank you, Heidi.
Just curious if there's a sense of timing, how long that will take to determine where the extra pollutants are coming from and the correlation of that and actual rates going up then?
Doing an investigation could be really quick, could be your first crack at it where you're suspecting something and you nail it, or it could take a lot more sampling and lab work. The rate setting, most likely, I mean, we're going to hopefully have a response from Baker Tilly on the sewer rates for our meeting next week with the Utility Commission. Moving forward, as to how those are allocated, it would be another year at least. I mean, they'd have to take a look again. And then it would give us time to do the investigation and see, the specifics of what we can find and how we want to handle it moving forward, and then make any corrections in the rates once we have that info, if it's deemed appropriate.
And again,
thanks, JJ.
Oh, thanks, Troy. So, and again, certainly we would want to look for that users. Maybe they can make some adjustments and correct things on their end too, so we don't, ultimately create this issue as well. I mean, that would be really nice if that can be done. But certainly, again, applaud the commission for digging into this and trying to figure out where it's coming from. Next, we have Heidi. You're still on the hook here. Parks and Rec.
All right. So switching gears, we met on the 19th. We also received the tree inventory presentation. We have been working with MSA on the master planning for the West Lawn neighborhood parks. So just to remind you, there's the smaller, about 1 acre park that already exists on Red Hawk. So planning that for 2021 improvements, and then in conjunction with planning that and the kind of pocket parks along the bike multi-use path in the neighborhood, and then looking at the bigger picture of the larger 20-ish acre park that will be dedicated in future West Lawn developments. So working with MSA, there was also a public involvement meeting last week that kind of brought up a couple of modifications to that plan. So that'll be coming forward to the board to approve the plan, and then how we want to move forward with Red Hawk Park kind of in the near future. So look for that coming up. Bakken Park is done except for a few landscape restoration items that may come up in the spring, so that's exciting. I don't know, Sean, if you have anything to add?
No, I think you hit all the high points.
All right, the next meeting's on the 17th.
All right, thanks, Heidi. Thanks, Sean.
I had a question.
Sure, Melissa.
I haven't driven over there yet, but is Bakken Park open now then for people to go into the parking lot at least?
Yeah, all the fencing has been removed. That was removed probably 3 weeks ago or so, and that park has been getting a lot of usage. I can every once in a while pick up folks on the camera system, and yeah, it's really getting a lot of use.
Great, thanks.
All right, good question. Then moving on to Deer Grove EMS. This would be either Sarah or Troy. And I see that Chief Lang is also on the line too for questions.
I can take it here. We met on November 19th. Year to date, we're slightly under calls. Year to date through October, slightly under last year, 17 less than the year before. On the COVID-19 update, hospitals in the area have been near capacity. There's also a thank you to Lieutenant Wagner for being very helpful in recovering some COVID funds, additional funds through the village. It's much appreciated, Lieutenant Wagner. Let me see here. There was a bargaining unit memorandum of understanding that was sent back for working on the policy and legal review. We approved $8,200 for Johnson and Block for the auditing and doing the financial statements. And trying to think of anything else. Staffing Advisory Committee, that is a committee that's being created that's not going to have any sort of funding. They're hoping to start that right after the first of the year, looking for a citizen member, preferably from the Village of Cottage Grove, along with a member of the village board. Doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's on EMS committee for just really more of an outside opinion. So that's something we should think about. And is there anything else, Sarah or Chief Lang, that I'm missing here?
I think the goal was that each village and town would bring the two names to the next Deer Grove EMS meeting. Did I misunderstand that?
I do believe that is correct. So we need to come up with a couple of volunteers. And it could be two village board members. But if we have a physician in the area that has an interest in this and looking at future growth, and when I say growth, staffing needs and that kind of stuff. But yes, it needs to be determined sooner than later. You're correct, Sarah.
So I'm wondering from our fellow board members if anybody is interested in serving on this short-term committee. No.
Crickets.
It kind of depends on when we would meet.
Yeah.
I mean, potential availability.
Hey, this is Paul Vanderbilt. I'd be open to it too.
Okay.
Jeff's not here. We could always volunteer for him something that he doesn't want to, necessarily hear. That's how it works in EMS. If you're not there, you get appointed to something.
I think that's the case with a lot of things, not just EMS. Don't worry about that. All right, so Paul or potentially Heidi. And then we need a citizen from the village as well, right, Troy and Sarah?
It doesn't have to be, but it can be.
Yeah,
but the committee's looking for
two from each. Two from each community, John, and preferably a citizen or a board member. Not necessarily a citizen, could be two board members.
Okay.
And then our next meeting is on next Thursday, December 17th. Before I forget.
Is that something that we want to put on our Facebook page, that we're looking for applicants for that committee?
I think that'd be a great idea. We could put it on the web page as well, couldn't we? Is that possible, Lisa? Those of us that don't do Facebook, I think it's evil, so I don't do it.
Yep, I sure can get it on the website and Facebook.
All right. Good idea, Melissa.
Great idea, though. Thanks, Melissa. Great idea.
And then we'll arm twist Heidi or Paul. But we do
I think just to clarify on the scope of the committee would be to help set a direction for staffing that meets the needs of the community while also having not only the medical and emergency needs, but the financial needs of the community, so that we can be respectful of both. That's why there's a member of the board on this committee to try to direct that path towards the future.
All right. Thanks, Chief Lang. Appreciate the extra clarity too. All right. Moving on then to NatFit Landfill Monitoring Review Committee. Jeff's not here, but either Paul and Melissa also attended. So either of you want to jump in?
I can take this one.
All right,
basically, the strand bill was normal amount. There was an update on the amount of they drilled into the landfill to get the depth of the soil before hitting the trash. And in some places it was 8 inches of topsoil. In other places it was 3 feet. So some areas are getting close to the surface, I guess, or don't have a lot of coverage. So we turned in some packet back to the DNR today. I think it was due. So we're waiting to hear back from them on that, and we'll know more at our next meeting in January.
All right. Thanks, Melissa.
Melissa, if I can ask a question in reference to that, the property that's, or, the sections of lands that's, 8 inches away from the topsoil, do they feel like that's an erosion issue, or is that just how much topsoil is put over that area and it's maintaining on its own?
That's a good question. I'm not positive on that, but we'll get back to you on the answer because that is a good question. I have a feeling that it wasn't fully covered. I mean, it might be erosion, but I don't know. So I will ask and get back to all of the board on that one.
And
I appreciate it because when you go by there, I don't see any washways or anything, and that's why I'm just wondering if it was just buried, 8 inches instead of whatever the standard is, 12, 18. So,
good questions.
I think the DNR will come back to the committee and tell them what they need it to be, and it won't matter what the 8 or whatever, it'll be whatever they determine they need it to be. But hopefully 8 inches is adequate, but if not, then certainly committee will take that and bring it to the various our board as well as the town board to sort it out with Strand.
It sounds like a good place for treasure hunting.
I hope not. Not with a pile of methane in there too. I wouldn't do that. But that's just me. All right, moving on then. Joint fire. Either Paul or Melissa.
That's me again. So let's see. Basically, I got to pull it up here. I guess I'll start with the discuss and consider item for repair of heat exchanger unit on rooftop of the emergency services building. The memo is in your packet. The heat exchanger was found to basically have some holes in it, and it's unsafe in that part of the emergency services building, which I think is above the workout room, that needs to be turned off until it's fixed because it's a fire hazard. I think that's what it was said, but we received 3 estimates for repairing it, with the committee voting to approve the Johnson Controls at the $7,875 amount. And the repair fund for the remaining amount of the year, though, is only $7,788, which is less than the amount needed for the repairs. So the committee approved the repair with the remaining amount to be paid in proportionate with the town and the village. So I think it's 50% village and 50% town, with the $87 to be split. And so I would be asking for that to be approved here this evening.
I'll make a motion that we approve the $87 in order to make sure that the building's safe. Obviously, in addition to what we've already put away as a community, as well as a town in our normal maintenance, to be used the remainder.
Second.
Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Now, Melissa, go ahead.
Great, thanks. So then getting back to the agenda, then we, the new rapid response vehicle, the transmission was not working. So we have a new one installed. It was under warranty. So that should be all done as of last week. We received the SAFER grant fund. We received the SAFER grant for the emergency services building sign. There needs to be new zoning. So there is a hearing on December 23rd, I think, with the county to get that zoning changed to the appropriate so that the emergency services building can have a digital sign then with digital messaging. There's landscaping issues that you brought forward to us, John, so thank you for that. And we decided that we would wait until spring, but Chief Lang did bring up that possibly planters there would be a good thing to do instead of bushes or rocks. So we'll bring that back in the spring when we're feeling more springy and more into planting stuff. The emergency services building sign is having some light issues, which we think was because of TDS hitting a cable or something. So Chief Lang and Chief Archibald are working with TDS to see if that can be resolved. The heat exchanger, the brush truck was that is the one from 1996. We voted to sell that rather than keep it. And I think the town is looking into purchasing bags or getting bags for the firefighters to transport their equipment to classes because they're all covered in chemicals. So putting those in personal vehicles isn't necessarily the best. So they're looking at getting bags then, which was one of the main reasons why we were looking at possibly keeping it as a utility truck. Turnout gear was approved to spend $20,000 from the Pleasant Springs funds to buy turnout gear because Madison College has a requirement now that turnout gear can't be more than 10 years old to participate in their classes. And a lot of ours was purchased in 2010 with a grant at that time. So we need to get new ones. And Chief Archibald we didn't approve enough to replace all of them, but he will prioritize who needs to receive them first and then put in the budget for next year to replace the remaining amount as well. Just as with EMS, fire calls are also down for this year slightly. And Chief Archibald brought up about future capital costs that include engine 3, as we all know, additional turnout gear and large diameter hose, LDH. Apparently, you're supposed to test that every year. And for whatever reason, we had not been testing it. And so they tested the 1,000 feet from engine 3 and 900 of it failed, like it had holes in it. So to replace 100 feet of hose, it costs $575. We have additional 1,600 feet of hose from ladder 1 and engine 4 that haven't been tested yet, but they're about 20 years old at least, and so it's likely that we'll have a failure rate with those two. So that's something that will probably need to be replaced. But hopefully not. We'll find out. Unfortunately, it's too cold now to test, and with COVID-19 precautions, the chief didn't feel like we could test it this year yet before it got too cold. And our next meeting is January 25th.
All right, thanks, Melissa.
Are they going to put the truck that they're going to sell on the state website, or are we going to just put a sign out in front of it, in front of the building? How are they going to get rid of it?
We're going to park it on your front lawn. That's a sign.
I don't care. I've got a good street corner. Most people slow down. They don't stop, but they do slow down. So.
No, I think they're putting on I think they're putting on the state website for selling.
Okay. I'm just curious.
Yeah. Thanks.
All right. Moving on then to Pure Court Steering Committee. So Jeff was kind enough to relate to me, not a lot covered in the last meeting held on the 24th, but the committee did meet one of the new counselors for Briar Patch. And then Jeff said next time if there's specific questions that the board has, he can address them at that point. But all quiet on the Pure Court front. Next then is Law Enforcement Committee. So I can take that since I'm going along here. So we met on the 24th of November as well. Not a whole lot going on, which is good. We continue doing well as far as the budget. Activity is fairly flat. Again, a lot of COVID stuff, a lot fewer drivers in some respects. The committee did approve what we tried last year as far as allowing those that do get, say, a winter parking ticket or another ticket that they can donate to our local food pantry in lieu of that ticket. It was received very well, and certainly the need is far greater this year than last year. So we proposed on running that from the 24th of November that evening all the way till the end of January. So that was that. Trying to think. Other than that, we did bring up future agenda item. There is an item around deer hunting in cities and villages. There's a state law that was changed that allows one to do bow hunting, and so the committee would like to add clarity as far as that goes to those in the village that would choose to do that to ensure that it's safely done. I don't know if I see Chief on the call. I don't see him on the call. Sarah, anything I missed? Or maybe Matt?
This is Larry. I'd jump in on that one.
Okay.
It would probably be a good thing to send to ordinance review because we should create an ordinance consistent with that state statute, something I'm very familiar with.
Larry, would you suggest that the committee, the law enforcement committee discusses it with the chief first and then kicks it over to ordinance, or we kick it right over to ordinance right away?
I would kick it right over to ordinance because you don't have any flexibility on it. It's just something we've got to do. We've got to allow that. And so, to provide that clarity for people, it should be something that we have in our ordinances.
Right. Okay. How did you get that? You're nodding. I see that. So
we're on it.
Yeah. Bow hunting. And Larry knows all about it, probably because he was involved in some aspect of it.
I wrote that statute.
Okay. Then you know all the things that we need to cover. All right. Moving on then to Public Works. That's myself as well. And JJ, jump in. I'll give it a shot. So we did cover, as was mentioned before, the bike path and what the ad hoc committee had discussed, and then went into the details of the plan as they stand now with Kevin and the MSA folks. And things are just moving along there as far as the application for the DOT grant. There are a lot of hoops to jump through that Kevin and JJ are doing, as well as some MSA folks, in order for us to take advantage of that. But it is a nice opportunity for us, and it is a sizable amount. So we will jump through the hoops. We did discuss the interchange of the bus road and Highway BB. Still a lot of moving parts there, including whether or not Shady Grove and what they're doing. And Larry may be able to chime in after I'm done, but essentially we're reaching out to their legal to basically get them to commit or not commit so we can move on with the design, because this has to go forward with the design very quickly so that we can move into the spring with getting it out for bid, et cetera. So it's definitely needed, and there's kind of some drop dead dates this month that really need to be met in order to figure that out. We talked about a wildlife or crane crossing signage. This was brought up to me by several citizens. There was apparently unfortunately, one of our local cranes was hit over by Market Place, by the Piggly Wiggly there. So the committee ultimately approved, because there was also just that prior week a deer that was hit, having JJ and the crew come up with a sign that's appropriate for that area. Cost is very minimal, but again, we just want to make awareness for people, particularly for our local cranes. They are hanging around more and more. The few days before this meeting, I happened to almost walk into two of them that were, while looking overhead, seeing a group of them fly off, and thought, well, you guys should be up there, not down here. So I think it's a nice thing for our community to recognize kind of that special thing that we have here. So the committee recommended that to move forward with some sort of signage. There's also sign. We were all talking about signage. Village Hall signage, discussed updating that as well, because it's been incorrect. And I think Melissa brought this to our attention that it doesn't say Village Hall, it says something else. So we need to get that sorted out. And there was some JD did some research, found a company that will do it for a reasonable cost, and we can get that addressed. There was a discussion about winter maintenance in West Lawn, the bike paths over there. The committee really was not in favor of having the village maintain those quite yet, because they don't go anywhere, and so that creates liability for us if we start plowing them, etc. At this point. Now next year it'll be a definitely different picture, because then a number of them will go somewhere. So that was discussed. Talked about improvements to Highway N related to the development down by phase 2 of Cottage Grove Commons, as well as the other areas there moving out. And so just went over that. That was something that was also discussed with the village board and plan commission too. And we'll probably end up having a special meeting related to that for Public Works to cover some details around that. Went through engineer's report, director's report. I'm sorry, the special meeting was related to Highway BB and Bus Road is what we'll need it for. Next meeting, maybe mid-month this month, depending on when that all is sorted out. And otherwise, we'll meet it on January 5th. JJ, what did I miss?
You covered it all. We do have discuss and consider for those recommendations for the 2 signage issues, though, for the board tonight.
Yes.
I put some memos in the packet, but I think they're pretty self-explanatory, and John covered them pretty well. So if there's any questions on either one of those, I can entertain those now.
I move to approve the wildlife crossing signage.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the wildlife signage.
Can we put a dollar limit? I see in the memo it says $44.90. So should we make that $50, not to exceed $50?
Sure, not to. Go ahead, David.
Those are. We've actually got money left in our sign budget line for this year, and we'll be restarting next year soon too. So, but they've already, that's already a formal proposal from our vendor, so we can. But it's going to be $44.90.
All right, not to exceed $50 then.
We'll probably get 2, so maybe we do want to make it 100.
Okay, make it 100 for 2 signs.
Where are those going to go?
That's Marty and I kind of both just took a drive, but really the wildlife we've seen, there's natural areas and water on each side, kind of a wide span there. So we were just going to kind of look at where we could attach them to an existing pole, and really just kind of bring people's attention to it kind of before you get to the pig as you're heading west towards Madison, and just kind of before you get to even Sandpiper there as you come in. So we'll just kind of put them somewhere to focus folks as they enter that kind of wide area where creatures travel back and forth between waterways.
Great.
And I think that's the most area. There are plenty of critters all over the village, of course, but that seems to be a natural corridor, with the green space and the other coverage and everything, I think, on both sides of the road. All right, we have a motion second to the wildlife crossing signage. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Next, discuss and consider is recommendation for the village hall signage.
I'll make the motion to approve
All right.
the village hall signage not to exceed $3,000.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay. Motion, I think Sarah beat you, Troy. Motion second to approve. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Thanks, JJ. We'll move on then to Library Planning Committee. Melissa.
Thank you. We met last Wednesday night, putting together the report and presentation, getting all our facts straight and ducks in a row so that we can present to the village board on the 21st of December and our next meeting, just to finalize things for the Library Planning Committee, is on December 14th.
All right. Thanks, Melissa. All right. Then we move on to reports from village officers, starting with Sanford. Larry.
I'm here. Nothing else to report.
I think John froze.
Are you still with us?
Need the vice president to take over.
There isn't one.
I nominate Lisa.
Well, let's move on to COVID-19 update. I'm going to start with, I don't know, Sean. Till John gets back and rescues us.
Oh, wow. Really don't have an update. Wondering if we could go back on our Parks and Rec report. There was an update. I put in something in your packet about our Facebook page. Just wanted to quickly touch base on that if I could. So I'd like to share my screen in case you don't have it. Sorry, I'm not used to being first, so I was not prepared. Okay, here we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. Just Facebook continues to, and social media continues to be a big part of what we do. If you can look at a couple things that I wanted to point out just real quick. If you can look at April of 2020, you can see our reach of 52,483. That was when we were doing our COVID 50 run, and so we really reached out to the entire country. And then also this number at the bottom in the column of total page followers. So in 2019, we went up 18% from the beginning of January until December. And as of this year, we're at a 33% increase from January until November. So people are following our page and paying attention to what we do. And we're really proud of that. And we continue to just remain as relevant as humanly possible and offering as many things virtually and making sure that we get the word out there. So that's really all I had. Other than that, everybody's healthy and happy and in Parks and Rec.
All right, I'm back. I froze, so I'm on the phone audio. You guys hear me okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I missed Larry's update and all the way through to Sean. So,
Well, I called on Sean to start, so he was the first one to go, and Larry didn't have any updates. So you can take it from there, John.
okay. All right, well, then we'll go right to Matt.
Thanks, Sean. As I updated the board in an email, we did experience our first 2 COVID positive cases with staff. Neither of those cases were traced back to village operations, and both staff people are doing well. So that's a good sign. But for extra precaution going forward, we're going to try to limit staffing in Village Hall to 1 person. There may be 2 at times during tax season, but we're going to try to limit that as much as possible. And but we will do our best to maintain an option for people to come in for in-person business, but we're going to limit that to 1 as well. And we'll communicate that another time here with a flyer in the tax bills to explain to people how some alternative ways that they can make their tax payments, as well as if they do choose to come in person at Village Hall, there could be a wait, especially during noon hour or maybe end of the day. Many times that could those high traffic times, there could be a little bit of a wait. And people also could, if they would like, they could schedule an in-person appointment. So we just want to make sure we still allow for that option for people if they aren't able to either pay online or utilize the drop box for some reason. So that is all I have.
All right, thanks, Matt. Lisa.
I do not have any COVID update, but I can give you an update on the recount. That was done on November 22nd for the village. It was a long day, but we had good results. We ended up having 1 drawdown of an absentee ballot, and that was the only thing that they had. Our counts otherwise came out perfectly to what we had reported on election night.
All right, thanks, Lisa, and thanks for your efforts there. Deb.
I don't have any COVID updates either, but I will let you know that the tax bills are at the printer and they should be coming in the mail next week sometime. So you can let everybody know.
Okay.
Yeah, I can ask when the village Christmas card was coming. I can let them know now. Thank you.
I had a question about the tax bill, actually. Well, not that, but do we do anything to remind people about paying their dog license or cat license?
It's in the community guide, or information about it is in the community guide, but nothing individually sent out to people, no. We could put something on Facebook maybe, or...
I was just going to say, I normally put something on Facebook to remind people because by state statute, they have to be paid, I believe, by March 15th, I believe is the date, for the dog license. We do not have a cat license, but we do have the dog license.
Do people usually do it? I mean, I put a thing on my calendar to remind myself, but do we generally have...
I just did my annual report, and the dog license for last year, I believe, don't quote me, I don't have it right in front of me, but I want to say it was like up by either 40 or 45% last year. So the last couple of years, we've had a huge uptick in licenses, and I don't know if that's part of their communication or people are just paying more attention to it, because they do need that license from us in order to get the Dane County license.
The dog park license.
Yep, the dog park license. Yep. So I think that has helped. But like I said, we do put a couple posts out there to remind people that they are due on Facebook and on the website.
Because I was thinking that if it was getting where people weren't doing it, we could send it with the tax bill, maybe, but doesn't sound like we need to do that. So good. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Deb. Thanks, Lisa. And thanks, Melissa. Chief Labor, I didn't see him on earlier, but maybe jumped on since I locked up. Otherwise, we'll move it.
He won't be here tonight.
Move right to Lieutenant Wagner.
Chief is he's taking in some rays down in Florida, so he won't be gracing us with his presence this evening.
All right, good for him. All right, hold it up to you.
It's still there. It's pretty predominant in Dane County. There's not a whole lot. I thought Chief Lang was going to stand and give more of a medical update. The hospitals are coming close to capacity, if not already exceeding capacity. So we, as citizens of the county and the state, need to do our best and be masking up and taking care of ourselves and our fellow people. So just three other things to bring up real quick. I think we should ask Larry if Sean's allowed to go back into the meeting, or if that's against meeting rules. We have 3,366 followers on our police department Facebook page, so we do better than Sean in Parks and Rec. And the last thing I have is alternate side parking did start on December 1st. So our staff has been out and about for the first few weeks, or the first week, 7 to 10 days. We try to do warnings first, just to remind everyone of that ordinance, and that we do need to be keeping the streets clear for JJ and his team to keep our streets clean. So again, Chief brought up the cans payments, so we will be starting that again. Actually tonight we'll be writing citations starting on December 8th. So again, we hope to not cite any citizens, but if you do happen to fall victim to it, please consider using the canned items to pay for your citation. That's all I have. Thank you, John.
All right. Thanks, Lieutenant. Appreciate it. And JJ.
I'll show Sean how it's supposed to be done. No report.
All right. Thanks, JJ.
President Williams, if I may, Lieutenant Wagner is mistaken, and page followers are very different from people that just follow your posts. So he is not even close to our ballpark. I'm all done now.
All right. Well, you guys can do a proper data analysis on that on your own time, and definitions certainly by sounds like it. All right. Moving on then to communication miscellaneous business. Starting off with consideration and approval of vouchers. Any questions, comments regarding the voucher list as presented?
I'll move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Next item is upcoming community events. I believe that Santa did light a tree over the weekend, last weekend. That was our, unfortunately, couldn't hold our traditional Christmas in the Grove, but there were a lot of things going on related to that, as well as still ongoing, I think, related to that. So very exciting to be at least trying to take in the spirit of the season. I did have Lisa send around the announcement for the Cottage Grove Community Foundation. There is an invite to them to come to the board in the future and present in the new year, particularly as they get some of their fundraising stuff off the ground. So very exciting to see that. organization start. Any other community events that should be highlighted?
John, I just wanted to mention, as part of Christmas in the Grove, there's a scavenger hunt that just kicked off today. You can win prizes if you follow the scavenger hunt. So that's going on for 12 days. And then the other part of Christmas in the Grove that's ongoing, you can purchase a snowflake at Piggly Wiggly and some other restaurant locations. And it's kind of like the charity stickers you put your name on that you see in other places. But the proceeds go to the Cottage Grove Food Bank.
All right. Thanks, Heidi. And then get around to see some of the lights of your neighbors, too. I took advantage of that with my family last night. Very pretty. Yeah, I think the judging was done yesterday, I believe, though, but still take an opportunity to do that. Future agenda items. We will have some related to Plan Commission, I believe, next time up. Matt, anything else that you can think of right now?
Nope, that's it right now.
Okay. All right, wonderful. Then we move right on to item 12.
I'll make a motion to approve for to adjourn, or to. I can't even come up with it. Oh my gosh, I'll make a.
I'll second.
Let's get this thing over.
That was classic. Classic Troy.
Yeah.
Man, I'm so excited to get out of here, man. And oh my gosh, I screwed it up. Hey, it's Monday. In 7 days, we got to look forward to. Let's just leave it at that.
All right. Motion and second, first and second, non-debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Take care.
Have a great week, everybody.